And now, News 4 at 5:30.
Topping the news here at 5:30, as we mentioned at the top of the hour, the Supreme Court struck down President Donald Trump's sweeping use of tariffs. The Supreme Court decision impacts the so-called reciprocal tariffs, but it does not prevent the president from imposing sector-specific tariffs under different trade laws, including levies on copper, steel, and aluminum. Those remain in effect.
To talk more about all of this, right now we are joined by Fred Floss, economics and finance professor at Buffalo State University. Fred, welcome back. It's great to have you.
Thank you for having me.
So I know Dave just touched on it a little bit, but there have been a wide variety of tariffs. Can you elaborate on which ones pertain to this Supreme Court case?
There's just one specific set of tariffs that go by EEIP, which he was using generally all over the world to impose tariffs. That was stricken down. The rest of the tariffs he can use are still in effect. So, as you said, the tariffs on steel are still going to be in effect, which is important for Western New York because we're looking at cars and auto parts and other things like that. So that's not going to be impacted. He then, I guess, in the last hour or so is talking about imposing a 10% tax. But what makes this confusing is that he can only impose it for 150 days.
Oh, so there's a time limit on it.
So there's a time limit on it unless Congress votes to continue those tariffs. So what this does really is it raises the level of uncertainty. It makes it harder for businesses to plan. No one quite knows what they're going to do. In 150 days, should I wait and then buy inventory then? Should I try to get inventory in right now before this 10% tariff goes into effect? So really what this has done is probably caused the economy to be disrupted.
Now, President Trump tried to spin this, despite the fact that he was visibly and obviously audibly very angry over this decision, leveling criticisms and even personal attacks, calling Supreme Court justices, including those he nominated, unpatriotic. So that all sort of aside, he was trying to paint this as a victory lap of sorts, saying the Supreme Court effectively now has defined my use or my administration's use of tariffs. And he tried to do a victory lap on that, but ultimately, do those tariffs not just sort of trickle down into greater costs for customers? Because they already have, right?
We know that from the studies that have been done so far, that about 90% of the costs of the tariffs are being borne by consumers. Right. And then the other 10% are either by importers or foreign countries. We also know that it's not increasing the number of manufacturing jobs and other jobs that he was trying to promote. On the idea that this is a victory because the other tariffs were allowed to stand, well, they were never before the Supreme Court. So there was nothing for them to rule on for those cases. And so I don't see how it's really a win in that sense.
Just briefly, do you expect those to be challenged just like these were?
I don't think so. I think they have been used in standard ways for very specific reasons. But now it's time for Congress to look at this because they need to step up and get rid of the confusion, because that's what's going to hurt the economy all across the country, not just in Buffalo.
While you speak on the confusion, there are also a lot of question marks surrounding refunds. You know, if those are possible, how that would be managed, what that process would look like. What would you think about that?
Well, there are already court cases going through the system asking for the refunds back. Most of those are large corporations because they have the lawyers who can afford to file the lawsuits, and it's not going to cost them much. The question becomes, if or when they win, how would they rebate that to their customers? Would they rebate it at all? That's going to be a marketing issue. It could be interesting to see what a Costco or a Walmart does. Do they put on a special and say, I'm going to reduce costs for the week and try to help people? Or do they just try to put it into their bottom line and help their stockholders?
You have been on this couch talking about this issue before, but I'm curious if, only because he singled out copper, aluminum, and other metals and things like that, with the trade agreements that exist between the U.S. and Canada, particularly Western New York and Ontario, as it pertains to automobiles and the automobile industry. We know those cars are literally going back and forth across the border. They're experiencing tariffs. Do we expect this to make that? We already know that was kind of a boondoggle and a difficult situation and makes it more costly. Do you expect that to get worse now because of this, or maybe unchanged because it wasn't the same tariff?
Well, with the new tariffs that he's imposing, the tariffs from Canada may actually be higher than they are today.
Right. Okay.
The second thing is that he's talking about getting rid of or withdrawing from the U.S.-Mexican-Canadian trade agreement, which allows for free trade between our countries. And again, being a border city, that's going to have a much larger impact on Western New York than it would be on other cities and other places away from the border.
Have you looked at all what the reaction has been from other countries like Canada or Mexico or beyond?
I think everyone's being cautious because we don't know what it is, so they're not going to get out front in all of this. Although I think in general, people see this as a good thing because the rule of law essentially was upheld. And that, for whatever reason, that the justices did it, shows that there is some limit to what can happen. And I think that, in the long run, is going to be the important part of this Supreme Court case.
Those next 150 days will be important as well. Fred Floss, thank you so much for joining us. We always appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.